everyone, Rich here from the rcnetwork.com, and today we're taking a look at my brand new ARRMA Kraton EXB. That is the extreme bash version of the Kraton. Comes as a full roller, so you do have to add your own electronics, but I have a video on that, so if you haven't already done so, check out my unboxing video, my electronics install video, and I do have a first run video out there that you can check out, and that's where we leave off with the Kraton EXB. Now in today's video, we'll be checking out the Kraton. I want to do kind of like a full inspection of it to see if anything broke, which I will report in this video, as well as taking a deep dive into one of the differentials. I'm going to go ahead and pull the front differential, take a look at that, how it operates, and if anything happened that as well after the first run. Now, a quick disclaimer on my previous videos. Now, there was a lot of scuttle regarding the electronics I chose for the Kraton. Well, I didn't actually choose those electronics. Those electronics were just pretty much what I had on hand here at the network. Now, being right in the middle of COVID right now, it's kind of hard to get a hold of things, so I had to use what I had. So are these the be-all, end-all electronics for your Kraton EXB? Of course not. If you want to run a Max 2 on 26S and put your gearing up to a 26 tooth pinion, by all means, please try and do so. But for me, this system worked out pretty good. I do have a new motor showing up here in a couple of days, which I will install probably on video and also take this out for another run. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let's get to the video. Now, with all of my RCs, I like to keep them in top condition, and as you saw in the beginning of this video, I always kind of give them a blowdown after I run them. I then disassemble certain things that just don't need to be there, like the wheels and tires. I take the batteries out, and then I just wipe them down with just a simple microfiber cloth and some glass cleaner. As for the body, it held up pretty good. Of course, it has all the notorious scratches on it, on the top of the hood right here, and of course the roof didn't always land on the rubber side, so got to pay the price for that. On the underside, it does have a little bit of wear. Seems like I got some shock towers poking up here on the underside of the hood. And of course, on the front bumpers, there's a couple of folding pieces right here. So, but overall, body's still pretty well intact, considering this is like an open-wheeled monster truck. I've inspected all of the wheels and tires and just basically blew them down with an air compressor. They seem to be holding up pretty well. The traction of these Copperhead 2s are awesome, and I don't see any cracks at all on the spokes of the wheels as well as the underside, so no cracks to report. This thing held up pretty well on the first bash run. Flipping it to the underside of the chassis, where typically you'll find most of the wear, there wasn't too much. I got a little bit here on the tail end. Of course, when you're landing, it just gets the shock compressed all the way and does bottom out on the bottom of the chassis. A couple of scratches here and there, a couple of gouges from when I didn't land so nicely. Some of the suspension arms have some definite gouges in them from probably bottoming out and just hitting rocks. So this was a somewhat little bit of a rocky terrain with some concrete and stuff kind of mixed in there. So definitely hit a few gouges on the front bumper, the front suspension arms, and the back of the rear suspension arms as well. Now, one thing I like to do for the driveline is I go ahead and I remove the pinion gear from the motor, and that gives me an idea of how the entire driveline is doing. I simply grasp a hold of one of the 17mm hexed wheels and just kind of spin this thing around to see how everything is doing. This one's spinning quite freely, so it seems like all the bearings are well intact. I take a look at all of the outdrives coming off the differentials to see if maybe something internally is wrong with the diffs. I don't see anything wrong with those. Then I also take a look at all the dog bones and the CVDs to see if I do have bent ones of those. All of mine appear to be very straight. The next thing I like to do is go ahead and pull the bottom suspension link. So shocks right here, I'm going to go ahead and pull that pin out and remove the shock, kind of flip them up, and then start cycling the actual suspension arms to see if I have any bent hinge pins and that type of thing. The Kraton has a pretty unique little pin design. The pin just goes straight in, but there's actually a set screw back here that holds it in place. So we're going to go ahead and remove those guys. Go ahead and flip the shocks up just so that they're out of the way. And now we can kind of cycle the suspension and kind of feel and see if there's anything that's bent. So right here, this feels pretty smooth. Go ahead and give it a drop. It should be dropping freely with no friction and no binding. We'll go ahead and repeat the same process on the rear. And cycle the suspension. A little squeaky there. Everything's still freely dropping, so I don't think we have anything bent, but we are going to inspect to see where that squeaking is coming from. With the EXB flipped over, I went ahead and removed these two screws right here and these two screws on the D block. That allows me to go ahead and remove the D block, pull the suspension pins that go on the inner arms right here to see if they're bent. Usually if you got a lot of creaking or there's any type of stiffness or stiction, that could be a bent hinge pin. So let's go ahead and remove that and be able to see if our hinge pins are actually bent. So pulling these guys out, they pull out pretty easily. There we go. And easiest way to tell if you have a bent one, throw it down on a flat surface, give it a roll. That one looks good. That one looks good as well. Now the other thing that can create creaking and that type of stuff is just dirt. Dirt can get inside there and create havoc. So go ahead and remove the actual suspension arm here. I have a 4mm arm reamer, so I'm going to go ahead and slide that through where the suspension pin would be. Kind of give that a little tug in there. See if there's any dirt and debris that's inside there. This one feels pretty smooth. Same thing with the other one. So we still have a little bit of creaking in the rear end, but the most important thing is we don't have any bent hinge pins, so that's a good thing. Now let's move on to checking out some of the aluminum and see if we had any bends. Now, a lot of the EXB's aluminum is made from 7075 aluminum, which is a little bit harder than a traditional 6000 series aluminum. And a lot of the EXB's is actually machined aluminum, including the shock towers, the braces, and some of the other parts that make up the components. Now, aluminum is notorious for bending, not breaking like plastic would. So a lot of people like to upgrade to aluminum because it won't break, it'll just bend, which it can't really be bent back without having a lot of fatigue to the metal. Once you bend it back, it just has a tendency to then break after all of that fatigue was in the aluminum. So the way I check out all of my aluminum pieces is pretty much eyeballs. I want to make sure that everything is straight. A straight edge can definitely help out for some of the components that you can get a straight edge on. So I definitely want to check all of the ears of the shock towers to make sure that those are still straight. Typically, if you bend a shock tower, you're going to bend it here on one of the ears that the shocks mount to from either a hard hit or something that would cause that. Now you also want to check all of the chassis braces. Once again, eyeballs on these to see if you have any bends. These ones are tough. Do the same for the front shock tower, just again with a straight edge, making sure that everything is nice and straight. The same thing goes for the chassis. Once again, this is a 7075 chassis plate. So eyeballs once again on it, making sure that there's no bends. You can take a straight edge once again and place it on the rear portion of the chassis up towards the front, actually underneath the front skid plate. It will kick up slightly on most RCs, but pretty much from the rear back, it should be 100% straight, which this one is. Now that we have the inspection out of the way, it's time to dive into the diffs. Now I'm going to take you through the owner's manual version of removing the front differential. It's got a few steps and you do have to remove quite a few screws to get that front differential out. But let's go ahead and start. I have mounted up a 2mm hex driver in my Bosch pocket drill. Let's go ahead and start removing some screws, starting with the 4 screws right here that actually attach on the little bumper squasher thingamajig. That's now out. Let's move on to the shocks. I actually reattached those, but we're going to unattach them again just so I can be complete on this uninstall. Pull the pin out. These have to be removed because you have to make clearance for the CVDs to actually come out. So there's nowhere for the CVDs to go, so you got to remove the shocks. Those can simply be moved out of the way now. Next are the 2 screws holding in the sway bars on the inner side right here on the lower suspension arm. And the final 4 screws are the front of the differential case. So you got these 2 right here and these 2 hiding down here in the bottom. I switched out to a 2.5 millimeter hex driver now in my pocket drill. Now you can go ahead and remove the front of the case, and that'll include the actual sway bar as well. Now, as you can see, the differential came very well packed with grease around the bevel gear, and it's kind of splattered inside of there. So that's definitely a good sign that it was assembled correctly. It has a good amount of grease inside there. Now, to actually remove it, you want to go ahead and grab the 2 front CVDs and just pull it forward. That'll kind of release it from its little case right there. And one little trick I know is you do have to turn these 2 out drives so that the flat section is facing out. Then it'll simply pop right on out. And there you have the front differential. Alright, so I went ahead and removed most of the grease. You can't get it all off of these differentials. Obviously, there's lots of nooks and crannies here. But on this side right here, we do have the GP4 marking. Not sure what that means. If you know what that means, leave that down in the comment section. And then also, of course, the 4310, which is the gear ratio. 43 teeth on this bevel gear, 10 teeth on the pinion. Now, the most notable feature about these new differentials is the helix pattern. It's kind of like a curved tooth, and they're actually a lot wider. They actually have 4.75 millimeters of contact patch versus the traditional Kratons, which has 1 millimeter less, so 3.75. This is said to have a 15-degree sweep on it versus the 5-degree sweep on the standard Kraton. So I've got a 2 millimeter hex driver loaded in my pocket driver. Let's go ahead and take this differential apart. Now, I haven't opened these diffs before, but let's take a look at what comes inside of these guys. So looking at the parts of the gears right here, we do have the spider gears, and the spider gears have like a flat plate on either end of them. That's pretty much just a little bit more durability so that they don't pull out of the plastic housing inside of the diff cups. Now, of course, you do have a gasket right there to keep all the fluid in. You do have the top and bottom gears. All of these are steel, of course. Inside of the differential is what's really changed. Now, what I'm told is on the front differential and the center differential, it has all of these plates, 6 in total, 3 on the bevel gear and then 3 deep inside of the actual cup. And I guess this is what activates the limited slip feature. Not an expert at this, just trying to explain this, but you can kind of see them kind of sun around each other. There's a kind of a sun gear on top, sun on the bottom, and then there's just a circular one in between. So not sure how this actually activates a limited slip, but that is what it is. And you'll see on the inside down here, there's also that. You can kind of see the little bit of oil that's left inside of the differential as well. And you can kind of see those kind of spinning around in there. Now, referencing the owner's manual, it does state that only the front and the center have those plates. Now, the rear actually has just a spacer in there to take up the space of them, so obviously using the same diff cups on the rear. But there's no signification of what fluid to use in the rear. I found that the center uses 100,000 CST oil, and the front uses 10,000. And that's why I went ahead and refilled the front right there with some 10,000 fluid from Team Associated. Now, kind of a pivotal moment here, and I've tested this several times now. You do have to load in all of those kind of plates into the diff housing. So you'd have your top gear laying on top of the spider gears, and then you'd have those 3 plates. That is a key step there that you do want to do before you drop in the actual bevel gear with the gasket on it. So I found this way to be the easiest. You definitely want those plates engaged inside of the diff cup right there. And as I spin this, you can kind of see the center one in there kind of rotating around. So that is a key indicator right there with these limited slip plates. So I'm going to go ahead and reattach this thing up, center this thing so I keep my sanity right there, so the cross pin is perpendicular with the actual pins for the spider gears. Went ahead and put in all 4 screws. I do like to do a star pattern, so this one right here, then flip over to this one, and then back across this way, and then do the final 5% of the threading with just a hand driver. That gets everything tight and nice and neat and secured down there. Now spinning this around, nice and smooth. I'm going to get this thing back in the EXB and give you my final thoughts. Now, one quick note, when you are reassembling everything on the front diff, or any diff for that matter, I went ahead and just test verified everything. Now remember, I don't have a pinion installed, so I have no resistance on the motor. I'm going to go ahead and give this a spin, make sure everything's spinning freely, and that you installed that differential in the right direction. Yes, they do have a specific direction that you install the bevel gear on. On the front right here, you want to do it on the passenger side, I guess US market there. So, and you definitely want to pay attention to that in the owner's manual. With that, that is my full video on the front differential teardown, taking a look at that limited slip feature, and of course inspecting, cleaning up my Kraton EXB and seeing if anything broke after my first bash session. Now, just to sum it up, I didn't see anything that physically broke on this thing. Everything's running very smoothly. I have some creaking in the rear of the vehicle, but that's to be expected with the fine dirt and silt that I was running this thing in. But all in all, super impressed so far with the EXB. This thing is pretty much tried and proven over 4 generations now of the Kraton, and the EXB is just even the better model. So if you're so inclined to install your own electronics, choose the correct ones, I think the EXB is the right one for you. As always, if you like this video, hit the like button. If you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you'll be notified anytime I upload a video. And finally, my name is Rich. Thanks for watching.